Hello there. The Scottish National Party, the SNP, has set out its timetable for choosing a successor following the surprise departure of Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Candidates can be nominated until February 24th, as the party announced on Thursday evening. If there's more than one applicant in the race, the party members should decide, and this vote is scheduled to take place between March 13th and 27th. A special party conference originally planned for March 19th, at which the party wanted to discuss its further strategy on the way towards Scottish independence, was initially postponed until further notice. Reported candidates include former SNP leader in Westminster Angus Robertson and Treasury Secretary Kate Forbes. Sturgeon's vice John Swinney and Secretary of Health Humza Yousaf are also considered candidates. Sturgeon justified her resignation primarily with personal reasons and the high burden of the corona pandemic. In addition, she has become too polarizing as a person on some issues. She wanted to give her party and her country a new start, she announced, and she will remain in office until the successor is settled. Sturgeon took office in November 2014 after the Scots had decided against independence in a first referendum, but that was before Brexit. She is the longest-serving Scottish head of government. She succeeded her party colleague at the time, Alex Salmond, who has since founded a new party. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon surprisingly announced her resignation, and She ruled that out just a few weeks ago, but she said at a press conference on Wednesday that she felt the time has come. She could continue fighting for a few more months, but she would no longer be able to carry out her duties with the necessary energy, she said. I heard that in New Zealand recently, by the way. Early on Wednesday, the BBC and Sky News broadcasters reported an intention to do so, citing government sources. The leader of the Scottish National Party has led government in Edinburgh, as I said, for more than 8 years, and that indeed is the longest tenure by a head of government in Scotland. She wants to remain in office until the party has chosen, so until after the 27th. At the press conference, which was called at short notice, she explained that she made the decision to resign out of love for Scotland. The past few years have been a heavy burden, and leading Scotland in the corona pandemic is the hardest thing she would ever have done. I certainly didn't have the toughest job at that time, but I did have a lot of responsibility, she said. Only now did she realize how clearly these stresses had affected her physically and mentally. Sturgeon, as I said, took over from Alex Salmond, and we talked about this 2 years ago a lot, what was going on between those two. Since then, she has repeatedly spoken out in favor of Scottish independence. In November, Britain's Supreme Court rejected a Scottish request for a referendum on secession from the United Kingdom, but Sturgeon wanted to hold another independence referendum in October 23 before that. The Scots had already voted in 2014, and that was before. The opponents got 55 to 45% of the votes, but the main reason for staying was Brexit. They didn't want that. And Sturgeon now said she wants to resign from office, not from politics, and that independence remains one of her biggest points she has to fight for, and she will fight for it, but she justified the desire for another vote with the outcome of the Brexit referendum in 2016. Because a clear majority of Scots voted against the UK leaving the EU, and that has now taken place. And SNP MP Stuart MacDonald on Wednesday called Sturgeon's forthcoming withdrawal a huge loss. The outgoing Prime Minister's commitment to Scotland was unsurpassed. Critics have accused Sturgeon of failing to come up with a convincing independence strategy after the Supreme Court rejected another referendum. Sturgeon was also criticized for her advocacy of trans people's rights. Her government passed a law in December that would make it easier for people to determine their own gender. However, The British government in London blocked the law, and they argued that it could have negative repercussions on national equality laws. Despite the criticism of her person, Sturgeon had emphasized a good 3 weeks ago that she wanted to continue in her office as head of government. And she really said she was not yet ready to resign. In the press conference now, however, she emphasized that she had been thinking about resigning for a long time. So, who to believe there? And I'm really curious, probably never will find out what happened in the background or behind closed doors within her party. Who put how much pressure on her? But the candidates that are there now, we will see if they do it better than Sturgeon. Because Sturgeon had said she will not make any recommendations for the next party leader. But dozens of supporters of the union with the UK celebrated, of course, in Glasgow on Wednesday evening, that because Sturgeon is considered the driving force behind the independence movement. Supporters of a detachment now see such a step as a long way off. But the Labour Party in particular could benefit from the resignation. The largest opposition party in the British House of Commons, which is against independence, had lost many votes in Scotland in recent years to Sturgeon's SNP, which represents similar social democratic positions. Now, Labour could be the beneficiary of a possible leadership dispute in the SNP and move closer to a clear victory in the 2024-25 UK general election. But that depends how the search for a successor in the SNP goes and who it will be with what political agenda. It is not clear that Labour will benefit from it. The only thing we know who's not going to benefit from this, even if they would tear each other apart in that race for succession, that will be the Tories. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.